Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing, the podcast for manufacturing leaders and professionals.
Designed for high impact on your way to work or unwind on your way home to gain clarity for tomorrow.
Step out of your comfort zone and discover new perspectives to add value, get results, and make a difference.
Yes, let's jump in.
Right off the hop, listeners, I want to ask you a question, just to answer in your own heart. Are you giving more than you're receiving? Are you adding more value than what you get? And where's your mindset on that? And a few years ago, I met Joe Johnson. Him and I connected because of the Minnesota Vikings. But what really came clear is some of our values. And he says, Trevor, you got to read this book called The Go-Giver. And I said, oh, The Go-Getter. That was kind of like how I am. And he's like, no, The Go-Giver. And I read it, loved it, did a book report on it when I was in Hawaii at the GENOS Emotional Intelligence Conference. And Dave and I have talked about that quite a bit. And what's your thoughts on that, Dave?
No, I read it too, and it was a different read. And I walked away from reading a book like this that our guest today wrote, and it was like a game changer for me in validating some direction in which I was headed, but also, and giving me confidence that to go full steam ahead with it. And I saw an example of that just last week. I was in Wyoming, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I booked a tour with a wildlife viewing guide, right? So we hop in the van, and Michelle is Irish, and it was Michelle and myself and my great aunt, and we're riding around Grand Teton National Park, and it became very clear to me that Michelle was clearly going out of her way to drive down dirt roads. She was looking while driving safely, and it's like she was brake tapping. And, at one point we actually saw a grizzly bear and a cub at her side. Well, she pulled over on the side of the road, and she moved up, back, forward. She talked to people, and, she was providing a value that I saw going above and beyond anything in which you would expect in a wildlife nature guide, right? And then just the conversation from the time she picked us up until the time that she dropped us off, and this is like a 4 or 5 hour deal, right? She shared with us, her personal story and life in ways that was just unreal. So guess what? I have talked about her and this organization in multiple times, in multiple references. Hey, if you ever go to Jackson Hole, you got to check these guys out, right? And I thought that was a great example of, in a very real world sense, of what this Go-Giver is all about. Because she was not about to just say, okay, I've got your money, I'm going to drive you around and wait, and I can't control if you see wildlife or not. Well, I know that, but she did an exceptional job, and I just think that was a great, maybe perhaps segue into what Bob has shared with us in one facet, just in the book, The Go-Giver. So,
and welcome, Bob. So excited to have you here today.
Thank you. It's great to be with both of you, Trevor and Dave. And I just absolutely loved Dave's story about Michelle. She is the embodiment of what a go-giver is, finding ways to absolutely focus on bringing an immensely valuable experience to those she's serving.
Absolutely.
Terrific.
And I'm just excited to share your story with our listeners, Bob. And for those that don't know Bob as well, he speaks around the world. He's the advocate for adding value and creating change. He's a Hall of Fame speaker, sought after, author of numerous books, and one of our favorites. And he sold over 1 million books. And this was co-authored by John David Mann. It's in 29 languages, Bob.
Yeah, we're very, very happy about that. It's been well received, and hey, great people like you have been the reason why the word spread, and that doesn't happen just because of the authors. Although John David Mann's a wonderful storyteller, it's because of him that the story sings as it does. But it's great people who've gotten behind it and spread the word.
Yeah. So Bob, you can't pen a book like that without stories of your own. And what would be one perhaps that in the world of manufacturing, folks might appreciate hearing, and where you saw, or either personally or with others, you saw a similar experience to what I had described?
Well, I think these come up all the time when it comes to manufacturing. It's so much more than just the product itself, right? It's being able to work with that potential client in such a way that they know it's not any more about you just delivering a product as it is Michelle just driving a vehicle and taking you around and hoping you see some animals if it happens to come up. It is being excellent at what you do. Of course, the knowledge base and understanding the customer, understanding their needs, understanding their desires, understanding how they're going to use this particular product, what they're looking to accomplish with it. It's also how you make them feel during it. Do they understand that you care about their experience? Are you consistent in terms of what you're doing and how you do it? Do you pay attention to the customer as a human being, not as a buyer of a thing? But you get to know them personally, because as you get to know them and create that relationship, you know that they're more likely to have that trust in you. Are you empathetic? The fact is, what you're doing and you do it all the time. The person who buys from you and has a certain application-based need for what you have, they may not know it like you do. And they have fears and they have questions, and they're spending a lot of money, and someone's career might be on the line if they make the wrong move. So are you able to empathize with them, which doesn't mean you understand necessarily exactly how they feel, but you understand they're feeling something, and you let them know that you do understand that and that you're there with them as their guide to help walk them through it. And do you express gratitude for their business, for the opportunity for the business, for everybody in their organization who is a part of it and who is helping in their own way, and in your organization? It's all these things that you do as a manufacturer that makes it so much more, about what you're building or fabricating.
Absolutely. Trevor?
I think when I back on my career sometimes, and I was labeled as that go-getter, right? So that's why I read your book. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, that was definitely me. And I remember, just trying to go after that next position and not as focused on the value. And I eventually got it. But I loved your one thing that I read, Bob, that was, humbly confident and don't get caught into those emotions.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, love that.
So yeah, and Trevor, let's go back for a second to the term go-getter, because I just want to reframe it a little bit. Now, I think it's something that John and I probably should have done better in the first book. And we did explain it in Go Givers Sell More. But we don't see being a go-getter as the opposite of being a go-giver, because we define a go-getter as someone who takes action. And I think either you or David mentioned hearing about a book that thought, when the person recommended I think it was Dave who had said someone recommended The Go-Giver, and he said, oh, The Go-Getter. Well, there was actually a book written about probably 70, 80 years ago by a guy named Peter Kine called The Go-Getter. And it was a beautiful story about a person who was given an assignment, and there were all sorts of obstacles and stumbling blocks in his way. But rather than allow himself to be thrown off track, he just kept at it until he finally achieved the result for the person he was supposed to do that for. So we love go-getters because go-getters take action. We're all business people, and we know you can have the nicest thoughts, the best ideas, the greatest of intention, but unless action's put into the mix, nothing's going to happen. So we would say the opposite of a go-giver is not a go-getter. The opposite of a go-giver is a go-taker. And that's the person who feels entitled, if you will, to take without having added value to the process. Now, at the beginning of the book, The Go-Giver, Joe was a go-getter who was also a go-taker. What
Mhm.
he became by the end of the book was he was still a go-getter, a person of action, but now he was a go-giver. Now he understood that to the degree you can move your focus off of yourself and place it on bringing immense value to others, that's the degree that not only is your work going to be more fulfilling, it's the most profitable way of doing business as well. And not for some woo-woo, way out there, just feel-goody type of magical, mystical reason. It makes very rational, logical sense. Because when you're that person who can, again, take your focus off yourself and place it on discovering what that other person needs, wants, desires, what do they value? How are you helping them overcome their challenges and problems? How are you helping them to move closer to happiness, if you will? Well, people feel good about you. People want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They want to tell others about you, much as Dave continually tells others about Michelle and the experience he had. So, yeah, so we love go-getters too, and I knew exactly what you meant. So, and I don't want you to feel in any way as though I'm being contrarian or so. I just wanted to make sure that we don't discourage people from being go-getters in terms of taking action.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's a great explanation, Bob, because I do sometimes question, and we all will question ourselves. It's like, well, it's not really, it's never usually the extreme. It's always some balance, right? Do you have balance in your life of taking action and adding value? And then it's more of an integration, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, it's not one or the other. It's both. It's not an either or. It's an and.
And so when that phone rings and the caller ID displays the name of the person that when they're calling, it's always something about them taking,
right,
and not a balance of, of course, accomplishing the goal and the mission. But all right, Charlie's calling, what does he want now? Right? Or Susie's calling, she must want something, because there would be no other way or time in why she would call me, right? And there are people like that in our lives, and that's true, and it's a great contrast there, Bob. The giver and the taker, and wow, that's
well, it's human nature, and and I think when we understand human nature and we see it for what it is, and then work within that, because we find that successful people tend to deal in truths. They look at the world, they look at people, they look at the way they are, not the way they wish they would be. Now, that doesn't mean you get stuck with that on that, right? No, but it means you first understand the truth, and then you work successfully within those truths in order to advance both yourself and others around you.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I'm working with a plant, and we did some emotional intelligence surveys on just observable behaviors, on how we show up, how they show up to each other. And it's really interesting with the peer groups. And in manufacturing, we talk about silos. And it's not for grain. If for whatever reason I don't understand, sometimes as peers, we see this as a competition, which makes no sense. But I've been there. But it's like, well, wait a minute. If I add value to the other departments, my department's going to do better. And why do we get stuck in that space?
Yeah, and again, that comes right down to human nature. It's the human being's natural tendency that goes back to the cave person days and survival, and you're in one tribe and someone else is in another tribe, right? And of course, some of those things from back those hundreds of thousands or whatever it was years ago serve us, but most don't. And because we don't have those same issues today, right? So this is where leadership comes into play. This is where everything rises and falls on leadership, because while anyone can lead from anywhere, a culture begins at the top and it trickles down. And so that leader absolutely must be aware of those silos. And create the emotion-based rewards for a non-silo type of culture. And that's a matter of bringing people on the same team. It's making people the same tribe. It's encouraging that behavior. So it's one team, and that's not usually what you see. Now, when the heads of the different silos are rewarded for what they contribute, even when it hurts the other ones, that's obviously you're rewarding something that is counterproductive.
Yeah.
People should be rewarded for performance, of course, absolutely. But part of that performance, when you're measuring it, is how are you helping as part of the team, not just your silo. So obviously there's a whole lot that goes into that. So we could drill really deep, but I think it really begins with that culture. Is it a culture where the leadership is accepting and encouraging those silos, thinking somehow there's something good about that? Or are they encouraging a team type of ethos?
Yeah. So Bob, Trevor, I mean, let me ask you a question. I mean, how would a leader, and Bob, what you just said, how would a leader know whether they're effectively self-aware or not?
Well, a big part of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. But one very important aspect of self-awareness is, and here's the big paradox, right, is understanding that we're truly not very self-aware. So we want to be self-aware of not being self-aware.
Bam. Exactly.
That is exactly, because the plan I'm dealing with is a fantastic plan, great leadership, great intentions, but those intentions don't always turn into people's perceptions and impact. And it's really trying to identify that. What about the opposite side, Bob, of sometimes we get stuck, and this is another thing that I've kind of picked up from listening to you, is that ability to receive, because sometimes that we get our egos and our silos, and it's like when we get the help, it's like, I didn't realize till later, it's kind of like, it's actually good to receive from somebody else. Why is that?
Well, receptivity and the issues with receptivity, and that's the feedback that John and I both receive from people, is that the law of receptivity is certainly the most challenging one for people. And, again, first, when you think about it, it kind of makes sense based on the world around us. Our belief systems as human beings are a combination of, and our belief system is simply our subjective truths, right? The truths as we understand the truths to be, not necessarily how they are, but what we believe them to be. And so our belief systems are a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, movies, popular culture, cultural mores, right? Though it's been, well documented that our basic set of beliefs are pretty much formed by the time we're little more than toddlers. And after that, everything just sort of adds to that basic foundational premise. So most of us, we live our lives really controlled by what I call an unconscious operating system. Thinking we're making choices out of free will and consciousness, when really we're operating within a matrix, just like the movie, right? The first movie, of course, not the other ones, but right, where we don't even know we're operating within this. And so one of them has to do with the messages we receive regarding prosperity and abundance and money and business. And the messages we receive from the world around us are really not mixed messages. They're terribly negative messages.
Yeah.
And, so most people are kind of under and this is, again, a very unconscious. It's not something we tend to consciously think about, but our relationship with money is and prosperity is very unhealthy. How you look at when people look at someone with a lot of money, what do most people think? Oh, I wonder what they did to get that, right? Who did they cheat, or who did that, right? And we see this in the media all the time. We saw this during the last political campaign, right? About how millionaires or billionaires shouldn't exist. And I'm not even being political here. I'm just saying anyone who would say that, what's that based on? Now, of course, if a person was dishonest and they made their money and they stole it, or they committed force or fraud or whatever, well, of course they should be in jail. But in the basically free market economy in which we live, simply meaning no one is forced to do business with anyone else unless someone is so politically connected that cronyism is involved, where they pay off politicians through donations to get special, which is not capitalism, by the way. That is not free market capitalism. That's cronyism, and
Right.
that should be totally illegal. But no, most people who have earned a lot of money in this country did it by providing a product or service that others willingly bought because they believed it was in their best interest to do so. They served a whole lot of people with immense value. They placed the interest of the consumer first because they knew that people weren't buying for, for our reasons. They're buying for their reasons, right? And so, but that's not how it's looked at. And so when wealth is seen as a bad thing, or a villainous thing, well, what do people get in their heads and their unconscious? Oh my gosh, if I make too much money, people aren't going to like me. Or maybe my friend Randy Gage, who speaks on prosperity, does some great riffs about movies and the terribly negative messages in movies when it comes to this. But he points out one which I think is brilliant in the first Spider-Man movie, when Peter Parker and his Uncle Ben were sitting talking, and Uncle Ben says to Peter, well, Peter, we may not be rich, but at least we're honest.
Yeah.
What a horrible, horrible message for a young kid watching that term, because what's the presupposition there? That if you're honest, you have no chance of being wealthy. But if you're wealthy, well, you didn't do it honestly.
Yeah.
Right. And so, again, this isn't a movie. This is every movie, just about, it's the culture, it's the ethos. Right. And so as you're now you're in business, you're bringing immense value to others. You've created that, what we call benevolent context for your success, and you should be receiving. But what do? Your unconscious begins to sabotage that.
Yeah.
Well, good people don't, receive a lot of money, right? So these are all, it's a lot of garbage. Okay. But that is so that's why I'm a big believer that we need to proactively study prosperity, proactively study it.
And Bob, when you're talking about that, it's also like more money is better. But in the context of giving, it's like, hey, when giving money away, hey, that just doesn't make sense, right? I mean, the basic math says if you give $1 away, you've now got one less dollar than you had. So this concept of giving and with money, more is better. No, more money is not necessarily better. It's what you do with the money that you have left over, or in the total sum or the outcome, right? And so, I mean, that goes right along with the same message of what you just got done describing. More money is not necessarily always better. Give, and watch what happens.
Well, okay, so there's a couple different aspects of this, because when we're talking about giving, and we're talking in the sense of the go-giver here, we're talking about giving value, providing value to others. Okay, not so much about money. But if we're talking about giving money in terms of charity, that's wonderful. Give charity according to your values. And here's the thing, we all seek happiness, okay? But what really is happiness? We could, in a very basic way, define happiness as the mental feeling of well-being. And that's a good definition. That certainly works. Mm-hmm. I take it a little deeper, and I say that happiness is a genuine and ongoing feeling of joy and peace of mind, the result of living congruently with one's values. Yeah. Now, let's take charity, for example, even though that's really, when we talk about the go-giver, we're really not talking about charity. But we're big believers in charity. It's just that that's not what the book is about. But let's say, for example, you have a cause. So one of my causes is animals, okay? And one of the animal charities is a local animal rescue, okay? And I decide to give X amount of dollars, write out a check for X amount to this charity, okay? That is not a sacrifice as far as I'm concerned. Okay. This is something that I do because it brings me joy.
Hmm.
It's congruent with my values. Okay. The animals don't know I'm doing that. They're not going to say, hey, Bob, thanks a lot. I really, really appreciate that. Okay. It makes me feel good to do that. And, regardless of what charities you are supporting. Now, let's say you're going to give 10 grand to a certain charity that you really believed in. Now, you'd probably rather do this. You'd probably rather be able to give 10 grand to the charity and also still have that 10 grand. But that's not the real world. Okay.
Right.
So what the decision is this: what makes me feel better about myself? What is more congruent with my values? Is it having that $10,000, or is it giving it to that charity I really believe in? Okay.
And this may be going too deep, but it's all about me. Me, I, in my giving, in my time, in what the value I provide. If I provide value that does not ultimately come back and benefit me, I question that. So that's an interesting concept.
Here's what I would say about this, Dave, that it's not ultimately, as human beings, we are pursuing happiness. And again, we're pursuing happiness according to our values.
Yeah.
But the way to do it most effectively is to take our focus off of ourselves and place it onto others.
Yeah.
That's why and this is why Pindar said to Joe, Deborah did in her talk. She said, if you want to make a lot of money, you've got to find a way to serve a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's, by the way, free market capitalism. That's the only that is the case, that if you want to thrive, you have got to help other people. Okay.
Right.
Now, if we're talking about charity, I also it's about, do we feel good giving to that charity? Again, is it congruent with our values? But it's not just about us. It's still about that charity because you care about that charity. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
again, I don't think it's an either or. And I always want to kind of take us away from that kind of thinking. I want to make it an and.
Nice.
So when we can focus on others, but we bring it back to, is it also something that we feel good about, that we're congruent with our values? Now we get to expand the world.
Yeah.
Love it. I kind of bring this all back to the original question, to the listeners, and are you giving the value? But I think what I learned today on this podcast was Spider-Man is probably my favorite superhero. And I think about Peter and I think of some of our leaders in manufacturing, and it's just that balance of, if you've gotten that mindset that you're just trying to make the plant better, make it better for the client, help others, but then you also got to be intentional, and it's okay to publicize what you're doing within your plant. And it's just, it's a positive thing. And there's a difference. And I love all this talk around balance, right? Because it's never extreme. Okay, you got to go all in this way. No, it's just like, it's okay to bring up the fact that, you did make this improvement and talk about how it's helping others. And that's okay. Because that's that thing of, to me, it's like, it's not necessarily money, but it's kind of the value they add. And why not share that and be a little bit intentional? And if you come from your heart in a good place, good things are going to happen. And, I was a little bit nervous. I reached out to Bob and Dave and I were talking, and it's like, we talk about the go-giver. We should ask Bob Burg to come on the podcast. And you made our day, Bob. You are a giver of your time. It was so exciting. And it's just been a fantastic conversation. And I just wanted to leave the listeners with your current project, which is you're doing the Go-Giver Success Alliance membership community. What's that all about?
Yeah, this is an online membership. We call it a membership/mentorship community, where it's really a whole bunch of successful people in different fields, and we get together. Wednesday is the day we do our 1 hour Zoom call, in which we learn, we discuss, we strategize, we collaborate, we really build the relationships deep. But then we also have on the site, we have all things going on all week. As long as someone has a smartphone, they can always be connected with us. There's a lot of exchange of ideas. There's a lot of connections that are made. It's really just such a high quality group. And really our goal is to really help our members get to their next level of both financial success and personal fulfillment. And we really believe it's not one or the other, it's having both.
Such a great mission. And thank you for all your positive influence on Dave and I and our listeners and our community. We'll leave those notes for the listeners here and some links there to enjoy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bob. And hey, I just want to give a shout out to Grizzly Country Wildlife Adventures. Love Michelle out there in Jackson, Wyoming. And Bob, it's been great to have you with us today. Thank you so much again.
My pleasure. And hi, Michelle, if you're listening to this, you're one of my new heroes.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. How you show up matters.
We'd love for you to subscribe, share with a colleague, and tell us what you think.
Your feedback's important to provide this high-quality, powerful program that makes a difference in your life and others. Take care.
See you next time.